I'll never forget the day my brother ruined the wedding cake I made, how it wasn't just a clumsy accident, but a deliberate act that exposed years of family favoritism and unresolved tension. I'm Emma, a 28-year-old woman from a small Midwestern town, born into a modest, hardworking middle-class family. My parents, Tom and Linda, spent their lives proving that character and perseverance mattered more than material wealth. Dad, a high school English teacher with a gentle passion for words, and Mom, a dedicated nurse at the local hospital, instilled in us values of hard work and humility. Our house wasn't grand by any means, but it was filled with love, laughter, and memories. Weekly game nights around our old, scratch dining table, where Mom's famous chocolate chip cookies and Dad's quirky stories from the classroom warmed our hearts. I grew up with my older brother Jake, who's now 32. We were inseparable as kids, spending hours building elaborate Lego castles or exploring the woods behind our house. Jake was always the natural leader, spinning fantastical tales about the magical creatures in our backyard, making me feel like I was part of something extraordinary. As we grew older, though, things changed. Jake's academic brilliance began to outshine my own average performance, and while I supported him, I couldn't help but feel a growing shadow of resentment. When Jake earned a scholarship to Meadowbrook Academy, an elite private high school in the nearby city, our parents, despite financial strain, took on extra shifts to support him. Suddenly, every achievement of his was paraded around as a triumph, while my quiet dedication to baking, my only escape from feeling invisible, went largely unnoticed. After high school, while Jake headed off to an Ivy League college on the East Coast, I stayed local, attending State University and working part-time at a local bakery. It was there I discovered my passion for creating delicious treats. The kitchen became my sanctuary, a place where I could finally express myself and feel proud of my own small victories. Years later, after countless late nights and scrimping away savings, I finally achieved my dream of opening my own bakery in our hometown. It wasn't a multi-million-dollar venture, but it was mine, a testament to my hard work and creativity. I hired 2 part-time employees, managed to support my parents with their expenses, and slowly began to establish myself in a community that valued hard work and authenticity. Then came the wedding of our cousin Amy, a joyful family event held in the rustic charm of a renovated barn on a local farm. I was honored to be asked to make the wedding cake, a 3-tiered masterpiece that I had poured my heart into for weeks. Every detail of that cake represented my passion, a symbol of everything I'd built with love, sweat, and dreams shared with my family. I arrived early at the barn to set up, my hands still trembling with anticipation and pride. The barn was adorned with fairy lights, wildflowers, and mason jars, evoking a warm, nostalgic atmosphere reminiscent of our childhood family gatherings. Everything was going smoothly until Jake showed up. He arrived just before the ceremony, dressed in an expensive designer suit that clashed wildly with the barn's rustic charm. Throughout the reception, he made snide comments about how quaint and provincial the wedding was, his voice dripping with condescension. I tried to ignore him, focusing on Amy's happiness and the culmination of my own efforts. But as the evening progressed, the tension between Jake and me grew. An unspoken rivalry that had simmered for years now reached a boiling point. As the night wore on, fueled by too many glasses of red wine and the usual pressure of family expectations, Jake's behavior took a turn for the worse. After a few flirtatious exchanges with Sarah, one of Amy's lifelong friends and a bridesmaid, he became increasingly aggressive. His comments became louder, his gestures more exaggerated. I watched mortified as he tried to impress everyone with his bravado, boasting about his achievements and mocking our family's modest ways. Then, in a scene that was both tragically comical and heartbreakingly symbolic, Jake, completely inebriated, tripped while attempting to approach Sarah again. In an instant, he stumbled forward, colliding with the table where my meticulously crafted wedding cake stood. The impact sent the cake crashing to the floor, a cascade of frosting, layers, and shattered dreams spilling out for all to see. Time seemed to freeze. The entire barn fell silent as guests gaped at the ruined cake, a masterpiece reduced to a mess in a matter of seconds. I stood in the corner, torn between shock and a deep, simmering anger that I'd harbored for years. Amy's face fell as she looked on, her special day tarnished by a display of arrogance and family dysfunction. For a moment, I felt the weight of all the years of unnoticed sacrifice, of my own quiet labor and passion, unraveling before my eyes. The scene wasn't just about a ruined cake. It was about everything our family had been. In that chaotic moment, all the unresolved tension, the unspoken resentments, the favoritism that had always left me feeling second best, were laid bare. Jake's fall wasn't just a physical stumble. It was a symbolic collapse of a legacy that had always favored him. And as I looked at the mess on the floor, I realized that while I had poured my heart into that cake, it was his careless actions that had ultimately destroyed something precious. That night, I didn't rush to help Jake or try to salvage the cake. I simply stood there, absorbing the weight of it all. I had no words left for the betrayal, no space in my heart for the shallow arrogance that had cost me so much. I knew then that something had to change. The cake incident wasn't merely an embarrassing mishap. It was the final nail in the coffin of our fractured family dynamics, a turning point that forced me to confront the deep-seated inequalities and unresolved tensions that had been building for years. Even as the evening continued with forced smiles and awkward conversations, the image of that ruined cake haunted me. I spent the rest of the night quietly reflecting on how our family had been shaped by favoritism, how my efforts had always been overlooked, while Jake's achievements were paraded as the pinnacle of our family's success. In the days and weeks that followed, the incident sparked heated discussions among relatives, long-suppressed grievances coming to the surface. Some of my family members expressed shock and disapproval, while others defended Jake's behavior, blaming the pressures of a competitive world for his actions. I, however, chose a different path. I poured my emotions into my bakery, channeling my heartbreak and anger into perfecting new recipes and creating a space that was truly my own, a sanctuary that was free from the shadows of family favoritism. I began to rebuild not just the physical space around me, but also my sense of self-worth. The ruined wedding cake, with all its bitter symbolism, became a catalyst for change. I vowed never again to let someone else's arrogance diminish my achievements. Instead, I embraced the belief that character matters more than accolades, that hard work and integrity would always outlast fleeting moments of arrogance. As I slowly rebuilt my life, rearranging my bakery, reconnecting with friends who truly appreciated my talents, I started to see that the fallout from that fateful night was not entirely negative. It exposed the deep-rooted issues in my family, issues that needed addressing if we were ever to heal. Though the scars of favoritism and betrayal remained, I began to find peace in the knowledge that I was finally taking control of my destiny. In the aftermath, my parents tried to bridge the gap between us. My mother, ever compassionate, would stop by the bakery to share a cookie and a story from her own youth, while my father offered quiet words of wisdom about resilience and pride in one's work. And slowly, as painful as it was, I began to understand that sometimes the harshest moments force us to grow. The ruined cake wasn't just an end. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be defined by the shortcomings of my family, but by the strength I found within myself. After that fateful wedding day, everything in my life seemed to shatter like brittle porcelain. The ruined cake wasn't just a disaster in the barn. It was the tipping point that forced me to confront decades of simmering family favoritism and unresolved tension. In the days that followed, I found myself trapped between disbelief and an intense determination to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Not just my bakery and my self-respect, but also the chance to finally rewrite the narrative of our family. I returned home from Amy's wedding with a heavy heart. Every memory of childhood game nights, Dad's stories from his classroom, and Mom's warm kitchen now tainted by the knowledge that my own brother, Jake, had orchestrated a moment of public humiliation. I couldn't bear the thought that the man I had once idolized, the one who led our backyard adventures and built Lego castles with me, had now become the symbol of everything I'd resented, the way our family's attention had always been skewed in his favor. The hurt was compounded by the fact that while my efforts had been quietly carving out a future for my dream bakery, Jake's high-flying achievements were celebrated by our parents, his every success paraded as if it validated all our sacrifices. In that moment, the contrast between our lives was as clear as the shattered remnants of my wedding cake scattered on the barn floor. I spent the next few days in a daze. At first, I isolated myself, wandering through my empty apartment with the taste of bitter regret and resentment lingering on my tongue. The silence was deafening, a void where laughter and family chatter used to be. Every corner of the place reminded me of a time when I felt seen, when our modest home was filled with the aroma of Mom's chocolate chip cookies and the sound of Dad's gentle chuckles over his favorite classroom anecdotes. Now, those memories felt like a cruel joke, as if they belonged to someone else entirely. I remember sitting at my old wooden table in the kitchen, staring blankly at a half-eaten cookie, wondering how one moment of arrogance could unravel years of careful planning and love. I had expected Jake's fall into the cake to be a moment of petty amusement, a minor setback that would quickly be forgotten, but it instead ignited a fire within me. Not a vengeful fire aimed solely at hurting him, but one that compelled me to assert my worth and reclaim the life I'd built with my own two hands. I decided then that I wouldn't allow this incident to define me or our family any longer. I contacted Chloe, my trusted lawyer, and an old college friend who had been by my side through every major upheaval. Over the phone, I laid out every detail: the ruined cake, the mocking laughter, the realization that years of favoritism had finally come to light. Chloe's tone was measured, but I could hear a note of satisfaction in her voice as she confirmed that I had the legal ground to reclaim control of the bakery and even renegotiate aspects of our shared family business. "You deserve to be the one in charge, Emma," she said firmly. "It's time to cut the cord and move forward." Her words resonated with me as I began to see that this was not just a personal vendetta. It was an opportunity to finally put an end to the family dynamics that had long held me back. That weekend, I gathered every document I could find: bank statements, emails, and receipts that proved how much of our shared assets were, in fact, solely mine thanks to careful financial planning. I recalled the refinancing moment when I had quietly ensured the deed to our home was in my name, a decision that had seemed trivial at the time, but now felt like a lifeline. I compiled these records meticulously, each piece a testament to the sacrifices I had made and the trust one had placed in a family that never truly valued my efforts. I knew that if Jake and our parents continued to celebrate his every achievement without acknowledging my contributions, they would eventually face the truth. I decided to call a family meeting, a gathering at my bakery, which had become my sanctuary and symbol of personal victory. The bakery was a modest space, filled with the rich aroma of freshly baked bread and the cheerful chatter of regular customers. On that day, I set up a long table in the back of the shop, laid out all the documents, and waited as our extended family began to filter in. My heart pounded with a mix of anxiety and resolve. I wasn't sure what would happen, but I knew that it was time for our parents, and even Jake, to confront the reality of our family dynamics. When my parents arrived, Mom's eyes immediately searched the room, her gentle smile faltering as she saw the somber expressions on the faces of some relatives. Dad, always the stoic teacher, took a seat at the head of the table, his gaze heavy with unspoken disappointment. My older brother Jake was noticeably absent at first, but I had arranged for him to be there as well. His arrival was quiet. He looked older, more subdued, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. As the conversation began, I laid out the evidence before everyone's eyes. I spoke softly but firmly about the years I had spent building something real, the countless hours in that very bakery that now served as a beacon of hope for my future. I explained how the wedding cake incident wasn't just a clumsy mishap. It was the final straw that exposed long-hidden resentments, favoritism, and a family dynamic that had always left me feeling like I was on the outside looking in. The room fell silent as I recounted every detail: the ruined cake, the mocking laughter, the public humiliation, and, most painfully, the realization that Jake's achievements had always come at the expense of my own dignity. My parents listened, their expressions a mix of regret and realization. Mom's eyes glistened with unshed tears as Dad finally cleared his throat and admitted, "We may have put too much pressure on Jake." That admission, spoken in a quiet voice, was the catalyst I needed. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start, a recognition that I, too, had sacrificed my own dreams in the pursuit of a family ideal that wasn't balanced. Jake, for his part, remained silent for a long moment, his face a mixture of shame and subdued anger. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Emma. I never meant for it to go this far." I didn't respond immediately. I simply nodded, absorbing his words, knowing that forgiveness wasn't as simple as saying sorry. I then laid out my plans for the future, how I intended to continue running the bakery, how I had already restructured the business to ensure that my hard work would be recognized, and how I would no longer allow our family's long-standing biases to diminish my achievements. I made it clear that this meeting wasn't just about airing grievances. It was about setting a new course for our family, one built on fairness, respect, and the recognition that every member's contributions matter. The discussion continued for hours, with emotions raw and memories shared. Some relatives sided with me, while others, more reserved by nature, simply nodded along. By the end of the meeting, there was an unspoken agreement that changes needed to be made, a commitment to a future where no one would feel overshadowed or dismissed. As I walked out of the bakery that evening, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The future was uncertain, and wounds would take time to heal, but for the first time in years, I felt heard and validated. I had reclaimed not just my home and my business, but also my sense of self-worth. And while the scars of betrayal remained, they would serve as a reminder of the strength it took to stand up for myself and the new path I had chosen, one where I was no longer defined by someone else's selfishness, but by my own resilience and determination.